The new 5.8 Abyss just came out, and I can tell you it's definitely more on the easier side. So the blessing for this particular season is that whenever a character triggers any Hydro-related reactions, including Lunar Charge, a shockwave will be released at the opponent's position, dealing true damage, which bypasses the enemy defense. This effect can be triggered once every 3 seconds. And as usual for this kind of buffs, it's just a nice little thing to have, but it's not something that is really worth to play around. Now, starting off with floor 11, the leyline disorders or the buffs are that every character in the party will gain a 75% electro damage bonus, making it advantageous for any electro DPS. So for Chamber 1, we have the Monolith Defense, where for the first half, you have to kill about 42 different treasure hoarders. They will spawn 6 at a time and they will spawn clockwise, but because they spawn all of them very near the monolith, no grouping is needed here. However, it will provide some amount of massive advantage. Although personally, I would recommend running a team that's able to have a decent amount of cleave or decent amount of AoE that's able to clear them really fast and just get the job done. Regardless of whether it's Arlecchino, Neuvillette, or whatever characters that you choose, it doesn't really matter. For the second half, you have to kill 3 Secret Source Automatons which spawn 1 at a time, particularly the Hunter-Seeker variant. Now, in their normal state, they do have 50% resistance to everything, but if you're running Red Shred units right, Chilonen or Kazuha or anything else of the likes like Escoffier, it shouldn't really matter too much. Of course, if you do build up the bar by maintaining the Night Soul Blessing state, he will basically do this laser move, which afterwards he will stay weakened for a very short amount of time, reducing his resistance all the way to the neutral 10%. The position themselves are not very notable. I think the first one spawns at the front, the last 2 will spawn at the back, and because there's only one of them, defending the monolith is quite easy because you can just do enough damage to draw their aggro away from the tower. Once you're done, we'll move on to Chamber 2. So for the first half, you have to kill a total of 12 different Fontaine mechs, and they mostly spawn roughly to the center to the front, so no grouping needed here once again. And there's no particular strategy here. They do have the Archon mechanic, but they're not necessarily the most tanky enemies. Just make sure you do enough damage and preferably a little bit of AoE, and then you should be good to go. For the second half, you have to kill 2 enemies, starting with the Fluid Avatar of Lava. Now, the avatar itself is permanently pyro infused, which means you can get free pyro reactions such as Vaporize. But however, it also has very high pyro resistance at 70%. So unless you have like a double red shredding unit or you're really feeling like a mad lad, and granted this is floor 11, you can technically just run a pyro unit if your pyro DPS just does that much damage. He will spawn to the front, and then the second wave will be the Fontaine Construction Specialist mech, which will spawn mostly towards the backside. No particular strategy here once again. Once you're done with this, we'll move on to Chamber 3. So the first half, you have a bunch of Nobushis, kill a total of 13 of them. The first 9 enemies are the regular Nobushis. They spawn in waves of 3, slightly to the front. No grouping needed. Once you kill the first 9, they're gonna spawn 2 waves of the Kairagi duos. You kill the first 2 Kairagi duos, and then you move on to the last 2. They do have the souling mechanic, where if you kill one, the other will heal themselves by half of their health, and basically be immune to Frozen and Petrify, but that's all it really is. Once you're done, we'll move on to second half. So for the second half, you have to kill 4 robots, the Ruin Grader and the Ruin Guard. They only spawn 1 at a time. The first 2 will spawn at the front and the last 2 will spawn at the center. There is the weak point mechanic, but for 11 overall, there's no notable strategy here. Now for floor 12, the leyline disorders are as such. The first half, all characters will gain Electro Charge and Lunar Charge damage bonus by 75%, and for the second half, the character's Night Soul aligned damage dealt to enemies will be increased by 75%. It is clear that the first half prefers you to run any Electro Charge or Lunar Charge team with Inefa currently. However, that's not entirely necessary, while the second half will definitely prefer you to run a Natlan DPS, but from my experience, I don't think any of the buffs are too necessary to deal with the current variation of the Abyss. For Chamber 1, the first half, you have to kill a total of 12 Eremites, of which they will spawn 2 of the medium enemies as well as 1 of the elite Eremites. Now, they all spawn relatively grouped up, so no grouping needed here. For the special elite, which is the Floral Ring Dancer and the Geo guy, you simply just have to kill the pet to make the master take a lot of damage, get stunned, and lose a lot of resistance. But because they're so grouped up to each other, as long as you have some amount of AoE and just Unga Bunga go, everything will just die and you won't notice. And then for the second half, you have to kill only 2 enemies. The first one is the Pyro Avatar of Lava. Once again, high Pyro res. Don't use Pyro DPS unless you have a way to reduce their resistance. It's also permanently pyro infused, so you get free vapes or any free pyro related reactions. Also, Overloaded does count as a pyro damage, so it does take less damage due to its increased resistance, so keep that in mind. And then the second wave will be the Chungus himself, Kongamato. Pyro is preferred here, however, it's not necessary. It does have very high resistance to Dendro, so ideally don't run the Dendro team on this half. Now, there's only two notable things is that it does have a gimmick where it spawns these 3 fruits on the ground. Hitting these fruits with Pyro will cause them to detonate and make it take damage. Each fruit will deal 5% of its max HP. Detonating all 3 will make it take 2 physical damage, that is about 15% of its max HP, and stun it for about 10 seconds. If you don't have a Pyro unit, its first attack will always be the triple laser split, so what you can simply do is stand on this patch with characters like Kazuha or Sucrose, and then make sure you use your burst. Kazuha burst should immediately infuse it with Pyro. Sucrose burst requires you to throw it a bit earlier hand, and then when your active character or Sucrose has Pyro applied from the Pyro patch on the floor, you simply stand under the burst in order for it to absorb Pyro. This should help you break the Pyro fruit mechanic without necessarily bringing a Pyro character. The same applies for the likes of Venzi. The only other notable move is that whenever it puffs its belly, that is its signal to do the spin attack. It will usually do this a total of twice before the next Pyro fruit release, of which it will basically go outwards and then back to the center of arena. So just try to keep this in mind if you play any Circle Impact team. And some additional strategy, if you want to stall a little bit for time, try to aim forwards walking to his back, because most of his attacks can only be initiated once it is in front of you, or rather once it's facing you. This should help you save a little bit of time in order for you to get the clear and minimize its movement as much as possible. For the second half, we have 2 waves, and the first wave will be a bunch of Ruined Sentinels, and they spawn very grouped up. There'll be about 3 of them at a time. No particular strategy here, just brute force through this. And then the second wave will be the last 3, which is 3 Ruined Drake Earth Guards. The only notable mechanic is that they do have high physical resistance, and whenever their eye starts glowing or they do a move where they charge up and the eye in front of them starts glowing very brightly, ideally you do want to hit them to prevent them to gain additional boosted resistance to whichever damage that did the most to it before it charges up. However, because they're all so well grouped up, you can basically just blast a bunch of abilities and I'm sure it's going to hit the weak point regardless of what you do. Otherwise, nothing of note here. The second half, you start off with the Pyro Wayob manifestation, and the Wayob move, well, you know how the Wayob does by now, but in case you don't, it starts with a trial move and creates a field. This arena will sap all of your character's energy at intervals and it will generate a white shield. The entire move lasts for 13 seconds and you cannot maintain any energy in the arena, however you can still generate energy particles with your elemental skill. So the ward shield is about 111% of its max health. You do increase damage, I believe it was 120% increased damage to the shield itself while being in the arena. However, if your damage is Night Soul aligned, you will do a total of 180% damage bonus. Now, breaking the ward shield within that time limit will basically create 90 base energy worth of particles, enough to generally give all your characters their elemental burst back, assuming your characters have a decent amount of ER. However, failure to break this ward shield will make it convert the remaining shield into a pyro shield. Of course, Hydro is going to be the best element to break here, but if you can play around the trials mechanic, this should be rather unnecessary. So there is 2 particular strategies for this one if you don't do enough damage. The first one is simply running a freeze team and constantly freezing it to prevent it from doing the trials attack in the first place. And the second one is you can stagger him with certain elemental bursts such as Xingqiu burst and Kea burst right when the wing is about to go down. This should prevent it from doing the trials attack overall through interrupting the animation. And for anyone who wants to run a freeze team, if you're running say like something like Nouvellette or you know your team has enough damage to break the ward shield, what you can do is basically shave off half its health while it is frozen and then intentionally stop your freezing or stop the act of applying frozen to it so that it initiates the ward move. Why this is something I would recommend is to prepare you for the second half so that your team is already strong enough to basically break it without really relying on freeze. So once it generates the ward, use all your bursts beforehand, and then once you destroy the ward, you get your energy back, which kind of saves you a lot of time in preparing against the second wave. Second wave is the Jadeplume Terrorshroom. He has high Dendro resistance and a decent amount of boosted one for the rest. He has a whole mechanic centered around Electro as well as Quicken Aggravator Spread. The bar above its head will build up based on what reactions or elements that you apply to it. Applying Electro will build 2% per hit. However, applying Quicken, Aggravate or Spread will build up 50% for every hit. So ideally, running Electrocharge or Electro-related teams or any of these 3 reactions is highly recommended here to play around it, but it is not necessary. Whenever the bar is full, it will do one of the 3 possible moves. Notably, I'll talk about the charging one. Whenever it starts charging, try to go to the nearest corner where the first charge will end up being, and then bait it towards the wall so that you can set your abilities early. You can also use your Elemental Burst to iframe the charge while keeping it in place next to the corner. This is mostly a tip I recommend for Circle Impact teams if that is something you want to do. Or alternatively, you can just wait for it to charge halfway across the map and then just wait at the center. It will eventually come back to you with the second charge. You can also do the same strategy here. Once it's done its special move, it'll be stunned for about 10 to 15 seconds and the resistance will be reduced to basically 0% except for Dendro still at a high 55. But other than that, the race is pretty straightforward, so there's nothing to mention here. For the final chamber, the first half, we do have the Pipilpan Idol local legend, which heavily favors Electrocharge and Lunar Charge. However, it does not mind running Hydro or Electro. So on the start, it will enter the Mirage Hat phase, where it summons 3 hats and hides in one of them. These hats will randomly swap positions 3 times regardless of what happens, and during that phase, the hats cannot be hit at all. Applying Electrocharge or Lunar Charge on the hat that he is hiding will not only prevent him to move for another hat, it will also build up his bar. The hat has about 40% of its max HP and takes 300% increased Electrocharge and Lunar Charge damage. So you want to destroy the ward shield that he has, defeat him in order to weaken him extremely. He loses more of that HP during the shield breaking phase, the more Hydro, Electro, Electrocharge or Lunar Charge damage that he takes. And of course, there is a bar above its head when it is in the hat phase. Building it up with Electro, Electrocharge and Lunar Charge will build up the bar tremendously fast, making you do a massive amount of damage to the special shield that it has, which makes it easier for you to really break around the phase. So once you get that done, he gets stunned for about 10 seconds or so. There's the regular phase, which there is nothing much to note. There's the hat trick phase where he tosses a barrage of hats to the player. The damage won't kill you due to the damage sequence limitation in the game. However, you will get staggered a lot once you're hit, so try to dodge it or get some sort of defensive option to not really worry about this. Now the second part is that the bar still maintains above him, and once again, you build the bar with Hydro, Electro, Electrocharge and Lunar Charge. It will make it do the special attack. This is mostly quite nice to have because this will extend its regular phase before it goes back into the Mirage Hat phase. So other than that, there's really nothing of note. Compared to the Stygian Onslaught variant, this guy has much lower health, so there shouldn't be any problems here as long as you play around the mechanic. And because it doesn't have boosted resistance in the hat phase against Hydro and Electro, it is possible for you to run Mono Hydro or Mono Electro teams, such as Nuvolet and Electro. Well, I'll just leave that up to your imagination. Now for the second half, the configuration device makes its return. It has a base 60% resistance to everything and only loses it when it gets paralyzed. So the way it works is rather simple. It does an average of 3 attacks before it enters the pillar phase where it summons the 3 pillars. The notable thing about the pillars is that whenever it does summon it, you have to climb to the top of the pillar, break these little weak points, and once you break 2 of them, you'll lose all the resistance all the way to -30% and be stunned for about 10 to 15 seconds, which is going to be your best damage window. Now here's a few things to note. So it generally does about 3 attacks before it summons a pillar, or generally on average every 30 seconds. So I'm not gonna explain the attack itself. You can roughly estimate based on how much time has passed. Just generally about every 3 to every 4 attacks, it will do the Matrix Dash thing, and then it will do the laser sweep around it before it immediately summons the pillar. Generally, the pillar, it will try to summon it right around the center of the arena so you can prepare your abilities beforehand. Alternatively, you can also accelerate this pillar phase by having a Natlan unit in your team in the Night Soul Blessing state. Entering and maintaining the Night Soul Blessing state will build up 15 points per second, and you have to build up all the way to 200. The more characters in the Night Soul Blessing state you have in the team, the faster the build up will be. Once the bar is full, you will skip all the waiting phase and it will immediately do the laser sweep attack before summoning the pillar itself. And aside from running on-field Natlan units, you could also use certain units such as Veresa using the double skill or Yansan with a skill to maintain the Night Soul Blessing state without necessarily being on-field. The Chino skill can also work in this regard, as well as Ororon. Now, here's a list of characters. I'm just going to play all the footage through that can go on its pillar. First, we have Aoife with his elemental skill. I have no footage because I have no Aoife as of the moment. Kinish with his whole skill. Molani when you use a skill and then you immediately jump up. Chaska with a skill, you simply just have to fly up. Marissa has two options, whether you use the skill into the plunge up into the air and grab onto the ledge, or you use a charge attack by holding your normal attack button. Mauika, whether on her bike form, regardless of whether it's skill and burst, Auroron and Sitlali simply by holding the jump button. Chilonan and Kachina can climb the pillar itself simply by using their elemental skill. For the Blinker class, all of these characters like Alhaitham, Chiori, Lanyan, and Kaching can simply blink up to the pillar by holding their elemental skill and aiming on top of it. For the jumpers, flyers, and plungers, Garming will be from the elemental skill onto the pillar itself, which will push him up. Benti with the whole elemental skill and then flying on top of the updraft. Wanderer by using the skill and holding the jump button to ascend up. Chen Yun using triple skill, which could be really hard, or simply just use a burst to get the plunge and then jump up. Xiao, of course, using the burst to jump up, but that's generally not worth doing by then unless your rotation is kind of there. For the construct units, we only have Albedo, Geo Traveler, and Zhongli. Albedo just use the skill and stand on the flower as an elevator. Geo Traveler just put his rock not on the pillar itself and then climb the rock and then proceed to climb on the pillar itself. And lastly, just Zhongli pillar, you just simply climb on it. And then a few miscellaneous one would be Dahlia with the whole skill. Then you stand on a puddle to get a simple boost up to the air. Or a unique one, which is Kirara. You hold an elemental skill to enter the cat transport mode. You have to jump on this particular short ledge and hold the forward button while doing this. This allows Kirara to basically grab onto the ledge in a cat form, allowing you to get up there without doing anything special. And as usual, there are the non-special options to be able to climb the pillars. I'll just go through it. Small short models can get a running start against this particular part of the ledge and jump on it at a specific angle, or you can just go to the side, go on the walk button and just simply jump up. Should be able to grab the little ledge and eventually jump up again to the top. Medium height characters can simply jump on the side of the ledge to grab hold on to it. It's about the same always. And then tall male characters will have to go at it a bit differently. They'll have to get a running start and jump exactly on this ledge that you're seeing right now in order to be able to climb it. Now, these are the three very somewhat skill-intensive strategy. However, if you're not sure, you can always practice this over on the overworld variant. Then you can apply that skill in order to beat this guy in this form. And of course, once you're done, congratulations on the 36 stars. And I don't really have much things to say here. Anyways, hopefully Abyss guide is helpful, and I hope you guys get your 36 stars. And I think that is it for this guide video. As usual, give it a like if you enjoyed it and found it informational. Subscribe for more endgame related content, and I'll see you guys next time. This is Ethereal, signing off. Peace out, everyone.